Good evening and welcome to London Ascending, the scene, Elysium generic in a undisclosed location, safety for kindred. Conversations can happen freely and in this Elysium, a beautiful woman, not as beautiful as some, but still very pretty, is wandering about, admiring it. She has a large blue snake coiled about her arms and shoulders as she does so.
Within the Elysium is a grey-suited man with a slicked hairstyle and a centre parting. His expression is grim, holding a suitcase within him, looking around the Elysium, trying to locate others, heading up towards the bar, ordering, or at least making a few words of conversation with the serving person there. He turns and heads into the main room, looking for others of his kind.
And as for Lord Shirley, well, he's there in the Elysium, in somewhat of a quiet corner, just simply watching the entire crowd, because that's sometimes what he usually does. Not so much a wistful observing the crowd, but really it's more a case of just kind of looking and just wondering why does he even bother sometimes. But then again, one has to bring up appearance, has to give times. After all, he is one of the sheriff's good men, and sometimes, there are occasions where his fist or his rifle is not required. And, naturally well, some people, at least in the modern period anyway, would probably think his appearance is, what's the best way to describe this? Well, me personally, I would think he looks like a twat, but I suppose some people might consider his stop. Yeah, laugh it off, laugh it off. I can poke fun at my own character. They'd probably consider his style to be, avant-garde, or, even somewhat new, but, handlebar mustache.
Alexander will approach Lord Shirley Farage, recognizing him as an older member of the court and a member of the Sheriff's Hounds. Lord Farage, may I have a moment?
Ah, yes, of course. It was Mr. Fable, am I correct?
Quite, sir. He takes a seat next to Farage. I hope this evening finds you well.
About as well as it could do. But then again, things could be very much worse. How about yourself?
As busy as always. The devil rests for no man, as they say. But I wanted to inquire over the state of the Hound's office with this ghastly piece of news of the Kine murder. It appears to myself that such a incident can be used for the betterment of our sect and society, and I simply wished to understand if the sheriff department has gotten involved in it at all.
Not to the best of my knowledge, however, it is still early days. If the good sir requires my assistance in this matter, I will gladly lend my aid. If, however, he believes that this matter is beneath their attention, or beneath the attention of more than one kindred, well, need I say more?
So it is not officially declared something of kindred interest, so it may be spun for influential gains. Am I understanding you correctly?
I would imagine so. I personally have no stock in it.
It's good to know. I did not want to infuriate the sheriff with my own weavings of tales, as I'm sure you can appreciate, Mr. Farage.
Of course. Besides that, does this eve fare you?
Quite well. I've had rather wonderful conversation with a member of my family who has recently arrived in London. Um, uh, the name of Laura, pretty young thing, seems to have a mind on head on her shoulders, and certainly could do our society quite proud, in my humble opinion.
Yes, I believe I had a brief meeting with them not all that long ago. Quite an interesting one, that one.
It seems we are. Sorry.
Yes, I noticed also that Mr. Peck also took quite an interest in her. And also that, what was her name, Lucinda?
Mr. Peck has always been a man of refined tastes. I believe that's a predilection of his profession, I suppose. But it does appear that our fair city is seeing quite a number of new faces. Anyone I should be aware of? I'm sure you are aware of everyone that comes in and out of the city.
There are a fair number of people that have come in. Some people have recently returned, as I say. Quite a extensive list. I'm sure you will understand if I miss a few names here and there. Well, there are some of the younger bunch coming in, or returning, whichever one you want to, whichever label you wish to apply to them. Beyond the one which you have already met and Lucinda. Pray forgive me. My mind seems to be falling upon other things as of late. Most of this Elysium that Her Majesty is presently organising for tomorrow night. Do you have any plans for this occasion?
Alexander smiles curtly, and trying to figure out whether Lord Farage has snubbed him. As a difficult kindred to read, he simply decides to let it go for the moment. It won't be good to make a scene or an enemy of one of the hounds. So he smiles a humorless grin and goes, Elysiums have been the least of my thoughts recently, Lord Farage. I'm sure I will make an appearance. Her Majesty does indeed at least enjoy my company, but I will not need to present myself. But it'll be interesting to see who does come along and in what circles.
They really should close those windows sometimes. Ghastly creatures. Anyway. Yes, I'm more than certain that Mr. Peck has something planned for that particular night. He seemed rather enthusiastic about my own predispositions, but then again.
That's surprisingly uncouth for Mr. Peck. I'm surprised he would delve into a kindred's personal...
Well, he was more interested in the story of how my sire presented me to the former Prince Morley. You know, it's stories made the rounds. It's really nothing special. You know, Prince Morley merely asked me what I could do better than any other kindred that he had presently met, and I simply said, I am very well adept with a rifle. So he asked me to show him. He took me out on the balcony of his office, and he pointed out a bell tower about, I would say, just under a mile away. It was I believe it was facing north-northeast. And he asked me to wait until the bell started ringing and deliver a shot right onto it. Not destroying it, of course, but masking the gunshot and the impact with in sync. And well, I did.
That's quite a story.
It's really nothing to it.
I can certainly we find that we agree there.
I'm merely, well, it's like Mr. Peck said that night. Not everyone in the Clan of the Rose is an artiste or a what do these young ones call it? A poser. Either way, not all of us are quite artists. Not all of us are poets, bards. Some of us are a little more different in the way that we create our art.
Well, if it comes to family affiliations, I think we all lose something when we stick to stereotypes, despite
Yes,
the bad gossip that does occur to stick out from the herd.
indeed. Though it's merely a case of to each one's own, I believe my sire would have called it. Whom was it that... Ah, yes, I do recall now. Have you seen our gracious host thus far?
I cannot say that I have.
It's a disappointment. Certain they'll show their face eventually.
Sorry, I'm just going to see if I can notice Amalia listening in. Beg your pardon.
I may as well roll something. It's probably going to be the only thing that I'm going to roll.
Ooh.
Yes, and it would help if I actually had a sheet up. Silly.
I don't have any specialties in perception, but that's 3 successes, so to ease the seas along. Please, don't be shy. You can come and join us if you wish.
Well, thank you. That is quite kind of you.
I cannot say that I recognize you. Are you new to town?
In the grand scheme of things, I would say yes.
Well, standing up, brushing down his grey suit, holding out a hand. A pleasure. Alexander Fable.
Amalia Salazar, and she'll place out a hand, and around her wrist is the tail of the snake.
He'll shake it, not going for the old-fashioned boutique of kissing the hand, which might take you aback depending on where you came from. But he'll shake it firmly, bow slightly, and then resume his seat.
Lord Shirley Farage, on the other hand, he stands up, brushes himself off, and then does the same thing. He takes the hand and leans down. When he actually notices the snake, and I'm presuming that he does.
It's a very large snake. It's hard to miss.
Right. Well, he's got some animal ken, so I think I'll just roll wit animal ken just to try and recognise the breed. And yes, with that number of successes, I think he'll presumably recognise the breed, where it's from, any of the facts
African
about it.
bush viper.
African bush
Very-
viper.
There's no antidote for its toxin, and it causes internal bleeding in those who are alive.
And you'll presumably know exactly like the region of Africa where it would go.
Yes, the Congo.
Yes, the Congo. African bush viper. Found those in the Congo.
A well-traveled and learned man.
And Lord Farage, sits up straight. Yes, I've had more than one safari in Africa. Well, I say safari, it was both business and pleasure.
As it always should be. So you do not think of yourself as an artiste. This is interesting for... I would then take you to be a rose. Yes?
You are correct. And yes, I don't consider myself an artiste in the traditional sense. And then again,
From the sounds of it, you are an artiste with your gun, though.
well, if you were to present me with a Lee Enfield, I could tell you a great deal about the intricacies of the bolt action design. I could tell you about the history of the design, how it was a step up from the breech-loaded muskets that our grandsires, well, our mortal armies had used in ages past. But however, I don't wish to bore the two of you. And he does like to turn to Mr. Fable, and does so, making sure that he is not. He's showing that he's not ignoring him. Yeah.
Seems that Alexander is very happy to see the two of you converse, but his eyes will switch between the two of you, just taking it all in.
As I said, I don't wish to bore the two of you.
Well, if it is a bore for Mr. Fable, then by all means, please change the subject.
Well, from a personal standpoint, I do think that these modern inventions of guns which have what we refer to as semi-automatic or automatic firing capabilities, they've lost something. There's no gentlemanly art to it. It doesn't take a great deal simply to aim a gun at the general area of whom or what you wish to fire upon and pull the trigger. It simply becomes a case of 30 bullets doing the job that a gentleman could do with merely one. There's no elegance to it. There's no refinement to it. Something you'd expect someone from, I don't know, someone from Hackney, for all intents and purposes. Plouth neighbourhood like that.
Yes, quite so. It's strange, with all the advances they've made, then in some ways they've become more barbaric.
Indeed. There's no accounting for taste or class these days, but sometimes the young ones do surprise even me.
I have yet to be surprised. I do try to stay abreast of much of it that goes on.
What do you find personally your current interests in? Apologies, I'm afraid I don't believe you've spoken your name.
Amalia Salazar, when you bent to shake my hand.
Apologies, my old mind does play tricks on me on occasion. Mrs. Salazar, what do you find your interests dive into these nights?
The fact that you do not recognize my name makes me curious. Yes, my interests. I'm very well skilled in the art of recovery, primarily of objects, items of note.
An archaeologist, then?
Yes, I guess that is a good way to put it. There is a grin on her face as she says that.
As I recall, I am familiar with your name, madam. They were more precious objects.
Oh,
Antiques in some regards.
so you have heard of me.
Well,
This
I
makes us happy.
well, I don't wish to brag.
Oh, there will be plenty of bragging tomorrow.
A little bit of pomp and circumstance should be expected in such a grand Elysium. We haven't had one for quite some time, I don't believe. It'd be interesting to see what the Rose puts on for us. I, for one, am eager with anticipation.
Do you know the rules for weapons, even if they are, say, a sword with the I am not fighting not on it? Are they forbidden?
Well, considering the rather martial tradition that some of us have, the general rule has always been keep the gun unloaded, or in the case of more traditional weapons, peace not.
Yes, that is the word. English has never been my strong suit, but I make do.
If it is any compliment, my dear, your English is perfectly fine. I can barely hear a trace of any accent.
Wonderful. I am very happy to hear that.
Well, shall we sit down, or are we comfortable with merely standing? And he kind of looks over towards some of the kine, which obviously are not paying attention to him now, but considering that they're three people stood up talking.
Apologies, I assumed I went to sit with you when you were sitting down at the beginning. But we shall take a seat, please. There's a table right here. I'm sure we can indulge in some refreshments.
Amma, you will sit?
And Lord Shirley will also.
So we have a very skilled marksman of a very elegant sort, and you, Mr. Fable, what is it you do again? I missed that part of your conversation.
I do apologise. My role within our community is a tacit and dull one. I am a politician by trade. I make sure that the wheels within our great sect turn and aid in what manner that I can towards our court. Simply putting the right people in contact with the right people and making sure that we flourish in the capital of the Camarilla. It is tiresome work, but responsibility has to drive on someone.
I see. Then you will likely venture.
I am considered a member of that esteemed clan, yes.
It is a pleasure, isn't it, Sapphire? She brings the head of the snake up and gives it a little pop on the nose with her own.
Fascinating creature. Where did you acquire it from?
Africa, in one of our many trips.
Yes, it's from the Congo, my good sir. Rather poisonous, as I recall.
Yes. She's been with me for a very long time.
Yes, I was going to say it might be an idea not to do that. They are quite volatile. But then again, if you've have it as long as you've said, then no doubt you already know how to wield it, so I will not preach to the choir.
I have
Now,
had Sapphire close on a century now. She was so much smaller when I first got her.
interesting.
So, tell me, Miss Salazar, what was the last item in which you have recovered? I'm sure you have plenty of stories of daring do if you are a creature that has travelled to the Congo to collect wild and exotic animals.
Oh, let's see. One of my greatest recoveries will be presented tomorrow, and it is going to be amazing. I don't want to spoil the surprise, though, lest word gets out and people come running for my haven, wanting their own piece of it.
As you were saying that, there's a quick sidelong glance at Farage, then at the implications she's giving, and there's a little uncomfortable shift in his shoulders.
You
Quite.
never know who's listening that you can't see.
True
Yes.
words being spoken.
Not to say that those particular gentlemen don't have their uses or a place in our society.
Oh, I said nothing of the sort. It's just, I am very careful about my gifts. To have it stolen out from under me before I am able to present it, well, that would be an insult upon me and my sister.
I would hate to think that anyone within our esteemed city would be so uncouth as to steal a present intended for the Queen.
Yes.
Oh, this present would probably make them the Queen's favorite member of court.
I shall, as a gentleman, refrain from telling Mr. Peck that before the Elysium is underway. I do admire that gentleman so a great deal. And, well, I think sometimes it is best to savor in the moment.
Well, I certainly admire your creativity for presents and, I suppose, the Toreador's one-upmanship of the bells of the ball. I'm afraid I must refrain from such activities and simply act upon my own merits to be able to sow favour within the court. And if the word has not spread yet, you can see that I am at least moderately successful in such, if not completely.
I can tell you that the gift was recovered from a Zemitzi. I'm not sure if they were a man or a woman anymore. Or both or neither. She was very old. Or he. I'm not sure. They were very androgynous. It was peculiar. I'm not even entirely sure they know that it's gone.
Yes. I cannot say with any degree of certainty whether or not I've ever met one of these fiends. Well, knowingly anyway. The
Yes.
Battle of the Blitz was... Well, let's just say I went through my supply of ammunition quite spartanly. So if I did see one of these fiends, these shimisi through the scope of my rifle, I did not know it. Or at least they did not make any such attempt to present themselves as being a member of that particular clan.
They tend to either take on inhumanly beautiful forms or inhumanly hideous forms.
So do
I s-
most art. Doesn't
I
make much
suppose the one thing that
difference.
connects them is that in their inhumanity, it's a completely alien concept. How they've survived so long is beyond me.
As I recall, they're quite territorial. So perhaps that might be the answer.
Most people have probably kept away from most of them,
Hmm.
just to avoid having to deal with them.
Wouldn't surprise me if their clan had a rather large collection of ghouls to do such things. Can't imagine it's quite so easy for them to infiltrate into human society with all that inhumane philosophy that they curtail.
I would not know. I did not stay there long, just long enough to recover our gift.
Well then, I'll commend you on your luck, or skill, should I say.
It is primarily skill. I have been honing it for quite a while. Before my embrace, even. Family trait, I suppose.
Well, I do hope that you're settling in well within the city. How are you taking the glories of London so far?
They are quite wonderful. Callisto has been so very kind.
I'm glad that is agreeing.
I have been cooped up though of late, so I decided to come out and look around, feeling a bit cabin feverish.
Hmm.
I'm sorry to keep the subject on such dire portents as the fiends, but you mentioned a philosophy, Lord Farage, of the inhuman creatures. I don't suppose I know you haven't met one, but have you heard of any inklings of what they actually believe in? I would find it fascinating to be able to delve in what would drive someone to that extreme, at least as a counterpoint to more civilized philosophies.
Uh, Not a great deal, I'm afraid. I've always felt it was probably rather similar to how's the best way I can describe this? The cult-like. I believe it might be an afterthought of the cult-like atmosphere that the Sabbat have. After all, when you're that merged in your inhumanity, it's bound to have some effect on you.
Which is why the dreaded sect issue religious connotations. It's not surprising that inhumanity and religion take, say, hand in hand.
I wouldn't quite say that. I've been to enough places to know certain tribal people, and they could hardly be called civilized. Well, by Western standards, anyway.
Point well made, but it does seem that humanity, for all its exalted graces, does have a tendency to leap at any excuse in which to butcher one another. I suppose it's the baseness of man that we must always contend with, for we are not the only ones with beasts. Perhaps that is, in fact, what the thing is entirely. And he takes a philosophical look, staring off into the distance, not really talking to you, but to himself. Perhaps the beast is, in fact, our humanity.
It's an interesting concept, one which my sire did talk about quite so often. I always found it rather a bore, in all honesty. But there is something to be said kindred and their beast. If I were to put it into words, I'd merely say that the beast is simply a representation of what man could be if a gentleman did not have his scruples, did not have his morals or his principles, did not have structure. However, when that structure is weak, obviously, little pieces of what lies underneath begin to show. Uncouthness, crassness, predisposition towards degeneracy, and so forth.
Perhaps we had an interesting concept that structure denotes us from the beasts, but it is a hallmark of civilization that created such things as slavery, such as the invasion of capitalism. The exploitation of your fellow man seems to be a civilized concept. Would you not think that would denote that perhaps the structure by itself does not save one from degeneracy? You can see that actually
No,
Fable is being quite excited about this conversation. Sorry to interrupt.
not particularly, no. Things like slavery have been around long before people in this country even could speak. Well, before people in this country could even count. I mean, after all, isn't it the Romans who, and everyone who else before them? You'll have to forgive me. My own knowledge of history has been limited to my own school lessons, you know. But as I do recall, slavery has been around for as long as there has been civilization. Human tribes have always subjugated one another when they warred against each other for resources, for women, for wealth, for farmland, for food. It's not a case of simply one civilization or one system or one method of ruling. It's just simply a case of the course of history.
I have heard of a group of people, though they wouldn't be what most would consider civilized. They've never taken slaves. Anybody that from the losing faction became dinner, the cannibals in the what is it? The Philippine areas.
Yes, rather I recall there, don't they? I believe the Spanish took them over, did they not?
I wouldn't know.
Never been there personally. Always much preferred the Raj of India.
Ah, that's something we can agree on. Well, I had the pleasure of sailing on one of the East India Trading Company's vessels during the heyday of Queen Victoria. Ah, it was indeed a culture shock, I have to say. Quite unique place
Yes.
in the world. I do miss
There
it.
is, if there is one thing which the Indians in their present day, they do commend the British Empire for, it's the presentation of the concept of an uncorruptible police force. True enough, it is by no means a perfect system there, at least last I recall anyway. However, considering the system that they had in place prior to the addition of India into Her Majesty's Royal Empire, the system that they had there was completely and utterly corrupt. It was being a police officer, being a police constable, was little more than a means to enrich oneself. It was like everything that I hear about in the Middle East, where in order to get anything done, you have to give a police officer some cash incentive or a gift incentive. I don't presume to have first-hand experience of this. As I mentioned before, I much prefer the jungles of South Africa, the Congo, the Raj of India, places where Her Majesty's influence could be felt.
It's such a shame that, when given to their own devices, that corruption, especially one for resources or status, seems to prevalent against the rule of the betterment of a society. I wonder if there would be a way to steer humanity in a more enriching direction for the betterment of all rather than for the few. Perhaps it will be a folly of an optimist, perhaps.
Well, if there is such a system, I do not know of it, I'm afraid.
But should we give up trying, Lord Farage? Or shall we accept the world as it is? It is the fundamental question. We're doomed if we do or damned if we don't, I suppose.
Indeed. If you do so find one of these systems, by all means, if you were to attempt to implement it into the world of mortals, I would commend you. I seldom have patience for that type of thing. But I would commend you whether it is a success or not.
Very kind words, Mr. Farage, or Lord Farage, I apologise. But as we both know, change is resisted, and those that speak out from the herd are often shunned as madmen or lunatics or fools. I have been called all three in my time.
I think my sire once said that in many ways there's not much of a difference between all three of them. It is merely the degree of success which dictates whether one is a genius or one is a madman.
I'm sure the Malkavians would mirror your sire's words.
Speaking of which, I should probably make arrangements for the yearly commemorations. True enough, the anniversary of the Battle of the Blitz has long since passed. However, it's never too early to make preparation for the next one. Saves
I
on having to make 11th hour preparations.
I admire your devotion.
Well, I can hardly say that I loved my sire, but I respected them.
I think that is more powerful and says much more towards your sire than a doting child.
Yes. I've always found that children acting as drooling sycophants to be rather disgusting personally. Certainly I would never expect any child of mine to be following my every whim. I would expect them to think for themselves, to question, to understand, to create their own art forms, if you will. I've yet to find any, well, besides that one incident a little while back, I've yet to find any mortal worth my attention.
Oh. Are we seeing a little bit in your demeanour, Mr. Lord Farage? Are you currently looking for a new child?
I'm, I'm rather cynical about this present generation, this present stock of mortals. I've yet to find one, anything worth my attention. I did have one a while ago. However, they proved to be rather a disappointment, and, well, they are no longer here. I don't know if it was a poor choice on my part, or just simply strenuous circumstances that they brought upon themselves, or maybe it was a mistake on both our parts. Either way, they are not here, and I am not presently at the moment looking for someone to give the gift of the embrace.
Some
Not that
people
I have.
simply do not.
Sorry, my lady.
Some people simply do not take to the changes that it causes. Well,
I suppose
they are not ready, even if you warn them.
it is true. I mean, after all, how many of us in here, in this room, in fact, in the city, in fact, why don't we go one step further? How many of our kind can safely say that they ever had a choice. I certainly didn't. But we make the best of one's situations, don't we? It's adapt and survive, or die.
A very Darwinian approach to life, not Raj.
Well, I was around at the time that his theories were starting to become commonplace. And it does ring a modicum of truth, does it not?
Perhaps to the animal kind, I understand that they had merits towards his proposals, but I cannot fully agree that we are just simply products of our environment, that we are but merely beasts that have learned to create clothing and have stood upright.
By
So
proxy, one could argue that the disciplines themselves are merely tools with which those of our kind have developed in order to survive. Being able, the use of the Auspex discipline, for example. I've often used it to help hunt down prey. I've used it to gauge their emotional state, whether or not there is anything that I should know about. It's easy for me to hunt down. I've never actually hunted without it, and I don't imagine any other canite kindred. Excuse me, out of character. That's my mistake, because I'm playing a fucking Sabat game as well. I wouldn't imagine any other kindred out there that has the Auspex discipline to not use it. It's a tool at the end of the day. It's like anyone with the ability to dominate the minds of mortals wouldn't use it to protect themselves or to ensure that the knowledge of their feeding has been passed should the emergency come up.
Perhaps, but there is the moral complication, of course, especially when it comes to the mental disciplines. Using it haphazardly or cavalierly can cause lasting side effects, and I hate to use the word brain damage, but towards mortals, or at least the sapping of their will has been documented in extreme cases.
Yes. I do recall my sire said that use of Dominate was a sledgehammer compared to the scalpel of the Presence discipline.
Oh, that is amusing. My sire said the exact opposite.
Well, perhaps it is as you say, a product of our upbringing. What would you say, Miss Imalu?
I would say that our disciplines are indeed tools. They allow us to do things that ensure our survival, our protection. Much like the snake's venom, it is a tool for hunting, but it is also a tool for protection. And as such, with the beast that rages inside us, can we really say that survival of the fittest is not true?
Survival of the fittest denotes an evolution in a creature, but as we are all very much aware, we are stagnant creatures. I mean, the laws and governance of our sect have remained constant for the past hundreds of years. Do we not feel that if we are a beast of evolution and change, perhaps we should embrace that for the betterment of our society?
But have you not adapted and changed to survive as the times have changed?
On an individual level, perhaps, but on a collective level,
While we maintain rules that ensure our survival, we, as a collective, change to survive in the society we have. Am I wrong?
rules, my dear, created in a Bronze Age handed down from sire to child for the past countless centuries, interpreted, misaligned, and mistranslated. Are we not a civilized society that can adapt a system of governance? If the Kain can reform their own parliamentary system for the betterment and enrichment of its populace, are we so mired in the past that we cannot do the same?
I would argue no in some regards, and yes in others. No, in the sense which, why change a system which, for the most part, works? As I discussed earlier, if there is a system with which every kind, every kindred may live in bountiful and plentiful existence, I do not know of it. If there is a system out there of governance for the kindred beyond that which the three of us have existed in for however long that we've existed for, I do not know of it. But yes, in the sense which we have somewhat of a stagnation, I admit. However, as the kind evolve, as the kind adapt and change, so do we. Slowly, but we adapt just as well, after all. The children are always coming up with these new ideas, these new concepts, technologies especially. I've never found the appeal, personally, of having a noisy, beeping child's toy in my pocket all the time. Look, I mean, just look at all these kind. They're all these plasticky things. What do you call them? Mobiles.
The mobile telegraph.
Yes, that. They seem to believe that that these things could endanger the masquerade. However, there is some limitations to these things. After all, they don't take into account. How can I put this? They don't take into account things that they don't look for. I mean, I can't speak from any point of authority, but if you don't know that something's there, you won't bother to look for it.
Very true. But the masquerade has held up its veil rather splendidly. And the fact of the matter is, with this birth of this internet and information travelling so quickly, people are even more jaded for faked film footage. Even something as ingenuous as our mobile phone will be questioned and analysed until it is forgotten from the kind's perspective.
Yes, it seems much rather convenient. I very rarely ever watch these television, whatever they call them. But every time that I do, it seems as if what do you call them, the effects which are special, they become more lifelike with every passing year. And yet, every time I see this, I can't help but wonder, how has the masquerade upheld it? And then I realize that when the kind are oversaturated with these branches of media, whatever you wish to call them, they are more predispositioned to disbelieve than to believe. At least that is my viewpoint on this
It seems we'll make a philosopher out of you yet, Lord Farage. I haven't been privy to you speaking so many words before.
I generally don't. I don't have the opportunity to talk about these things. I'd rather just go out and feed, and perhaps with a few friends or with a few of the sheriff's hounds, the younger ones which still are. They still like their automatics.
Well, if you do feel the urge to deliberate, as we have done this evening, I find that a small collection of us within London hold little soirees, simply for the love of conversing and trading ideas. Perhaps I should send you an invite next time we have our little soiree.
Perhaps I'll accept it.
How about you, Amalia? Do you enjoy the deliberation of ideas between peers, or are you much more a visceral kindred that prefers to hunt, as Lord Farage has so eloquently put?
I am definitely much more of the visceral sort, though my sister, oh, she is quite the butterfly. Yes, she would most definitely enjoy this socialite. She would tend to drag me along just to keep an eye on me, make sure I'm not getting into too much trouble.
Well, it has been a very charming evening, and it was wonderful to meet you, Amalia, but alas, duty calls, and I have a number of errands to perform before I take my rest this evening. I will be looking forward to seeing you at the Elysium, Amalia. Or Miss Salazar, I should say. Lord Farage,
Good evening, Mr. Fable.
And good evening to you, sir.
with that he will take his leave.
Well, perhaps you'll indulge me. Where exactly in the Congo were you when you found your precious sapphire?
Yes, we were on the northeastern edge. We'd come down from Egypt. Uh, maybe 2 kilometers in. She was quite young at the time.
I'm surprised you were able to get her out of her nest.
When you can speak with the animals, they are more apt to listen.
Oh. I suppose that would be a very appropriate skill to have in such an instance.
It can be.
Oh, thank you, Miss Miss Salazar, for allowing me to have this audience with you. And I hope,
You're quite welcome.
and I look forward to your presentation tomorrow at Elysium.
Oh, I am sure everybody will be. It will be something to be remembered.
Likewise, I hope my own presentation has. Well, it's not the first time I have made a presentation. It's not quite in the same way as this one. I'll not bore you with the details, and I'm certain that Mr. Pex will undoubtedly be a good lead-in, I believe, for the clan of the Rose entirely. And I'm certain if your own gift is as magnificent as you make it out to be, that the Queen will be most assuredly happy.
Oh, I'm certain she will be.
I will take my leave now, my lady. Again, thank you for having me, and have a most pleasant evening.
Good evening, Lord Farage.
With that, Lord Farage steps out of his seat, gives a courteous bow to Miss Salazar before he turns about face and leaves.
Maya contemplates for a moment. He likes all the guns. Hmm. I wonder what sort of collections he has. Another time I must return to home. The sapphire must be getting cold, aren't you, my dear? And with that, this scene will come to an end. Thank you for playing. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.